say something that's relevant to
the member can't seek leave for another member. Split call in Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. From time to time, Mr. Speaker, this Parliament unfortunately considers bills that can only be described as a solution looking for a problem. And it is sad to say that the Immigration Amendment Bill is most certainly one of those bills. If we look at the stated purpose of the Immigration Amendment Bill, it is to deter people smuggling and to enable the effective and efficient management of a mass arrival of, quote, illegal immigrants. Mr. Speaker, let's look at the first part of that stated purpose. The most significant deterrent that we have to people smuggling will never be a piece of legislation. It will be the Tasman Sea and our geographic isolation from the rest of the world. And I know that John Key seems to think...
Yeah, point of order. And I think I can guess what it is.
Yes, I believe a member is able to use props.
Yes, only the member may use a visual aid at the time he is actually speaking. It's not for other members to display. In Lees-Galloway.
Mr. Speaker, I know that... no, it's the right way around. I know that John Key thinks that Western Australia, or the arrival of 66 Sri Lankan refugees in Western Australia, vindicates his decision to push this legislation through. But I have news for Mr. Key. I know that he admitted today that he really doesn't have a clue. But the fact is that Western Australia, as the crow flies, is more than 5,000 kilometres away from New Zealand. And Cam Calder tried to suggest that this wasn't actually too great a distance for a boat to traverse. I would be interested to see a boat ploughing its way through the middle of the Australian desert to make its way to Auckland, New Zealand. The distance by sea is much farther, and it is a treacherous and difficult journey, one that no other boatload of people seeking asylum in New Zealand has ever been able to achieve. And besides which, that group of people, by landing in Australia, actually made themselves ineligible for asylum in New Zealand. So again, Mr. Key cites a problem that doesn't exist. We actually already have the law in place to deal with that group of people. Mr. Key is clutching at straws, to say the least. The second part of the stated purpose is to deter people smuggling by creating a system that is so punitive that nobody would want to take it on. Well, we know from experience that it simply doesn't work. Let's look at Australia. From the 1990s to the mid-2000s, Australia introduced a range of policies aimed at deterring asylum seekers arriving by boat. Despite that, between 2000 and 2001, 94 boats carrying 8,455 people arrived in Australia. It is not the legislation that will allow people or stop them getting into a country. It is simply the access and their ability to get there. And getting into Australia is an awful lot easier than getting to New Zealand. The other side to this is the effective management of large groups of people arriving. Now, this was modelled on 500 people making it to New Zealand. But it actually talks about groups of 11 or more. Our system can already deal with those. This legislation on that front is absolutely redundant. The true purpose of this legislation is that it is another one of John Key's WMDs, his weapons of mass distraction. Remember the first reading of this bill? The first reading coincided with John Banks getting found out for his dodgy donations. They needed a distraction back then, and so in came this bill, first reading for John Banks. The second reading coincides with the GCSB debacle. Again, this government in desperate need for a distraction from John Key's cluelessness. What will it take to get us to third reading? That's what I want to know. What will be the next debacle that this government wants a distraction from to get this bill to third reading? This bill is quite simply about National's natural fallback position, which is when it's in trouble, it engages in the politics of division, the nastiness, the vindictiveness, that draconian approach that only the National Party knows how to do.
Dr. Kennedy Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Select Committee has reported back